guys, and welcome back to Dragon Exotics, and today we will be joined by Fumbles and Sinky and Mav later in the video. Now today we will be talking about our second topic in our Sulcata care series, which is the enclosure. Now last time we talked about the diet, and I have his breakfast all squared away, so you'll see that at the end of the video as well. But let's get started on the enclosure. So the first thing I want to talk about is what kind of enclosure you're going to choose. Now, if you have an adult sulcata and this applies to you, just make sure you know that the minimum size requirement for an adult sulcata is 100 square feet per adult. Now, I'd recommend that you'd have fencing around this area, and if you can, just have a cement bottom, maybe one of those like deep plastic pools, plywood, just something so your sulcata does not dig through the ground, get under your house, or get into a neighbor's yard and escape forever, because nobody wants that. So when making an adult sulcata enclosure, just make sure you keep those things in mind and make it so they're not going to escape, because that's one huge problem that many sulcata owners have once they reach that size and age. Alright, so let's talk about the smaller Sulcata tortoises, such as the hatchlings or maybe up to 2 years old. So these guys require a bit of a different setup. When I got Sinky, he was about this big, he was super tiny, he still had his yolk sac, and they told me he'd fit in a 10-gallon for a pretty long time. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And this was at the Reptile Expo, so I got a nice little half wooden, half glass 10-gallon tank. It was pretty nice, and it only lasted like 3 or 4 months. So I'm like, okay, guess I have to upgrade again. So then we moved over to a 30-gallon tank, 30-gallon long, and within a couple more months, he ended up growing out of that one as well. So now we were like, man, we're wasting all this money on upgrading tanks that we know he's gonna grow out of. So we decided to do a custom-built garden box, which we then turned into a tortoise enclosure. The one we have is 7 feet wide by about 3 feet long, and it's pretty nice for him. He likes it. It's gonna last until he's around 2 years old, and that's when we plan to put him outside anyways. So it's a good setup, and I'd recommend something like that. It's just if you want to save money. If you want to keep upgrading on the tanks, you can. Just understand that they're going to grow like crazy. And thank you, Fumbles. They're going to be growing like crazy, and you want to keep in mind the material you're using for your enclosure. We chose a wooden garden box because he won't be able to see out the sides, which is not only less stress on him, but he's not going to be, he's not going to be as curious to try banging his head into the walls to try and get out because he doesn't see anything out of the other side. And 2, tortoises they don't understand the glass. So when they see a glass area, they're going to be like Fumbles stealing that bag right here. That's great. But yeah, they don't understand the concept of glass. So normally when a reptile or even a tortoise, they see glass and they're like, oh, I can just walk straight through that. They don't get it. Kind of like this one here. Yeah, talking about you. It's pretty sad, and you don't want your tortoise or even reptile banging their head into the glass just because they think they can get through. So even if you have to use a glass terrarium, make sure that you cover the sides with something so they can't see through it. Or just go to a wooden-based one, which is always nice. She's misbehaving today, isn't she? For this reason, I also like to recommend the rubber bins and tubs that you see most people using. 1, it retains humidity a bit better, and 2, they can't see out of it, and 3, it's a little deeper than most, so they have more room to dig down. So those ones are also a great option, and I actually found it surprising that if you just Google minimum size requirement for hatchling Sulcata tortoise, they will tell you 18 inches by 18 inches by 12 inches. So they say that will last them a year. Based on my experience and how fast Sinky grew, There's no way that size enclosure would have lasted him a year. At least not comfortably. I don't see how that works. Sorry, Google, but you don't get a point on that one. Now that you have your container out of the way, now we are going to move on to substrate. But I did want to put in a quick fun fact before we move on to that. Sulcatas don't hibernate. Keep that in your mind. They are not like other tortoises or some reptiles who are technically brumate, but they don't hibernate. So don't plan on them hibernating during the winter. Keep an eye on them. Do not lose your tortoise if they're outside. They might act a little bit slower because of the colder weather, but they aren't going to go out and hibernate. So yeah, fun fact. Let's talk about substrate. The substrate I like to use is either the forest floor or cypress mulch, which is practically the same thing. I'm gonna post pictures of it here and here. And those two are a great substrate to use as the main base. I personally like to add in a bit of this eco earth, and it's practically just compressed coconut fiber. And what it does, it helps kind of shape the substrate that you need or the soil that you need in the enclosure. So if they do dig, it kind of holds a bit better. It also helps retain humidity. Young sulcata tortoises definitely need this kind of substrate that retains humidity because it will help them prevent pyramiding and some other factors such as that. The amount of substrate that you use can vary. Adults prefer a couple of feet to 10 feet of substrate to dig in, while hatchlings only need about a couple of inches. Personally, I only gave Sinky a couple of inches until he reached around a year or so old, because until then he really wasn't interested in digging. So I increased the amount that we gave him for substrate later on. He still only adds a couple of inches, but it's more than he used to get. The next thing you're going to need in your enclosure, once you have your container and your substrate, is you're going to need some sort of thing for shelter. This is one of those, I believe Zilla, let's see on here. Yep, one of the Zilla hides. I had actually cut the front of it and then sanded it down so it's a little bit bigger for him. He had this when he was younger and fit perfectly, and then he totally grew out of it recently because he just hit a growth spurt. But you need some sort of shelter or hide. Next you're going to want moss, which this is sphagnum moss. You can use some of the others or the actual like brand name from PetSmart, but it's the same thing. It's just going to help hold humidity. You'll just grab a bit of it. Yes, Fumbles, thank you for showing them. Thank you for showing them, Fumbles. You'll just grab some of it, soak it in a dish, grab it out, put it in the hide or anywhere else in the terrarium that you'd want to be humid, and there you go. You got a nice humid spot or a humid hide for your tortoise. I would like to add that during this video, Fumbles has been on her worst behavior. It's great. She just wants to destroy things. Yes, she does. Okay, she's crazy. Anyways, let's continue talking about tortoise enclosures because that's what we're here to do. As she was trying to help with the sphagnum moss, we're going to grab the water dish. This is a fairly decent sized water dish for my size of sulcata tortoise. He used to be so small in this thing, and now he almost takes up the whole dish. So he takes baths in this, he drinks from it. I change it daily because he tends to get it a bit messy, and yeah, it's messy. Tortoises are messy. Fun fact. Along with the water dish, you're going to want some sort of food dish or something to put your food on. Some people use a nice big flat stone, which works well. But I personally use one of just the reptile dishes because Sinky prefers it, and it's what he likes to use. Another note on the hides, you can use those little planter pots, and you can just put it in the soil, so like half is submerged, half is above, and that way they can go into that as well. You see here? You see this? She's crazy. She wants to destroy everything. She thinks everything is for her. everything. Okay, Fumbles, let's talk about the next section. Next section is enrichment. Oh, I love enrichment. It is the best part of any reptile or tortoise enclosure. I have this beautiful bin here that is just full of all of these wonderful things. We've got logs, we've got fern, we have just artificial decoration. He used to have live plants in there, but Sinky has an interesting personality, meaning that if there is live plants in there, or pretty much any decoration I put in there, he will knock it over and just run through it, which includes the plants. So those did not last long in his enclosure at first. So I have to stick to the artificial ones. He's not interested in eating them, so it's still safe for him. But yeah, that's for Stinky. For anybody else out there who happens to have a well-behaved tortoise, yes, you can add as many live plants as you want. Just make sure, as I said before for the diet, look up a toxic list of plants, trees, everything to put in there because you don't want to get your tortoise sick. I will be going into what exactly I'm going to use and how I'm going to set it up in the enclosure once we actually get over there and get it all started. But now for my favorite and the most important topic about setting up an enclosure is the lights. Yes, the lights. Because I have such a big enclosure, I use these little dome lamps, and these are filled with 100-watt heat bulbs, specifically the Zoomed Basking Bulbs. And I have a second one over here, 2 basking spots. I'm gonna knock things over. 2 basking spots. One is about, I try to keep it 95 to 100. The other one is anywhere from 85 to 92. It's pretty good, adds variety for him so he doesn't get too hot in one area, too cold in the other, and keeps an ambient temperature of about, I don't know, I think 85. But it works well for him. Next is the UVB. Now this is a 24-inch little strip bulb, is what I'll call it. But these ones are the best to use. I'll send a link in the description and a picture of the packaging right there. And these guys last 6 months to a year before you have to change them again. And even then, you got to keep the hood, just change the bulb, of course, like you would for any other. Okay, Fumbles. You are crazy today. Crazy. Well, you have a UVB bulb in your enclosure. I also recommend taking your tortoise outside as much as you can, just so they get the actual natural sunlight, because nothing beats the natural sunlight. Of course, we haven't been able to perfectly simulate the sun's rays in these bulbs, so you want to get them that natural sunlight when you can. UVB and natural sunlight is important because it helps the tortoise create their vitamin D3, which then helps them develop the calcium to channel through their system. But without that vitamin D3, they won't be able to pretty much form their bones properly, which then can lead to metabolic bone disease and carapace deforming and all of these things that just aren't good for them. I don't know if you've seen pictures of poorly developed tortoises where their shells are all bent in and their limbs are bent in different directions, but it's bad. So always have UVB for any reptile, and it'll help prevent some of those issues, along with their little calcium supplement. That also helps. Wow, Fumbles is a great helper today. Okay, Fumbles. So it looks like we've covered what container to use, which in my opinion, you should use at least a 2 feet by 4 feet wide, a 2 feet by 4 foot wide rubber or wooden enclosure, or a glass enclosure that is covered at the front so your tortoise can't see out of it. So we've got the container squared out of the way. We've covered the substrate, which is the forest floor or cypress mulch coconut fiber mix. And then we have decor and necessary things that you need in there, such as the water dish, the hide, the food dish, and enrichment in general. And finally, we have covered the lighting. Now, we have the UVB bulb, which is definitely necessary for them to utilize the right calcium. And then we have their basking bulbs, which help them digest their food at the right rate and help their metabolism just stay where it needs to be. So without the proper heat, they won't be able to digest their food properly. And one more thing before we switch over to actually setting the nice enclosure up is my messy area. This right here is a reptile timer, and this is the zoom in one. It's fairly easy. You just plug them in and they're all set to either turn on a certain time or turn off on a different time. So if you have all lights that you want to turn on at the same time and turn off at the same time, this is perfect. And I'll also send a link in the description where you can get this. We have a nice little thermometer. Okay, you're gonna break this in 2 seconds. But yeah, nice little thermometer. That happened. Yeah, thermometer, and then a hydrometer, which I'll show in once we set it up. And this is my own little setup. It was a reptile snake hide that I added a little fogger, a mini fogger piece into. And, oh, fumble. Yeah, a mini fogger piece into, so it adds extra humidity into the enclosure when needed. Are you seeing this, guys? And on that happy note, let's get to setting up this enclosure. As you can see, I had added Sinky because he was getting a little bit too stressed in that container. So I put him in here. I had already added the substrate. So we have a couple inches of this. It has some of the hay in it for more variety, but this is a nice balance that you want to go for. If you don't do enough of the monthly changes on this, the coconut fiber tends to get really fine and powdery, which is not good for their lungs. So you have to be careful on how often you do a change. Why, hello, Fumble. No, don't eat that. Don't eat that. Don't eat that. Poor Sinky, I know I'm adding things. I am adding things. See him trying to get at the sides. It's because there's no enrichment. He's kind of confused. It's not his normal area. So let's liven this up and kind of help him out. First thing I'm going to add, just in case he wants to use it, is this nice old cutout hide. And I'm going to put that back here, kind of over here. He can, are you, Fumble? We don't eat wood. Go to your perch. What a silly girl. Sorry, Sinks. Go on, go to your hide. It's nicely over there. He can go under it if he wants. Surprisingly, tortoises like nice snug fits, kind of like snakes. So if you choose a hide, just make sure they're gonna feel comfortable in it. See, he's heading straight over. Next thing we are going to add is our water dish. And let's put that right over here. I personally, just a preference, I like to line mine with a couple rocks just around the side to keep him from moving it, because as I said before, he likes to move his stuff. Okay, so we got a bit of rocks around that. This makes it a bit nice. Let's add that. Okay, Fumble is currently climbing down my basket, unless you guys were curious. Now she's flying. Hey, Sinks. Came to say hi? What a good boy you are. Okay. Let's add some more enrichment. This is just a log, and I kind of like to dig it in there a bit so he can walk across it, and it also files down his nails a bit. Sinky. Such a good boy. Next, we are going to add some more rocks. I'm gonna add it in an area so that he just has a full rock area to climb on. Fumbles is getting caught eating wood. That's not safe, Fumbles. That's not safe. Go on. Yep. Now this is a nice little ball that I place in here because he loves to move around things. So it's kind of a toy for him. Okay, Fumbles. Along with this thing right here. So they're nice little toys, good for enrichment. Oh, Sinky. Next, we're going to add another log. This one we're gonna put right under the basking spot. Gonna dig in there and get that in there. Okay. Yeah, just some more things to file down his nails. We've got a nice little tree here. We're gonna put it by his hide. Hopefully that'll stay intact. He tends to rough up his cuttle bones, but I put these in here for constant extra calcium. So some tortoises like to chew on them, some just don't. So you gotta be careful on whether your tortoise is gonna like it or not. Gonna put this vine right here, cover it up a bit. It's another shady place to kind of hide if he wants to. Yeah, so far this is what it looks like. Oh, Sinky. He's already exploring, already using that enrichment. And we're gonna put a little tree next to the water. Like that. And as I said before, he's not typically interested in eating the plants. You have to monitor them though, because if you have a tortoise that is gonna eat the plants and you put plants like this in there and they're suddenly disappearing, your tortoise may be eating them, and you have to be careful that they're not gonna get it impacted into their system, because yeah, you don't want a vet visit. That would be bad. Okay, Bumbles, this on the other hand is not what happens. Come on. As you can see, Sinky's not the smartest. He thinks that the rocks are food, so. We're gonna put this lovely dish right here. Kind of cover that up. And we're gonna put the cord on this side. Cool. And fill that up a little bit with water. Now I'm gonna fill the rest into the actual water bowl. There we are. Beautiful water area. Now it is time to add the lovely food dish. So we're gonna put that over here, nicely raised above the ground. So here we have some enrichment over here, some rocks by the water bowl, some toys, some more shady areas, some rocks that he is going to try and eat. Which, another nice thing about this cypress mulch and coconut fiber mix is that if they do accidentally ingest it, they aren't going to, hi Fumbles, they aren't going to get impacted, or they have less of a chance of getting impacted through eating it. So that's always a good thing and a nice thing to watch out for when choosing your substrate. But let's continue looking at the more enrichment areas. We've got the fogger, which I'll turn on at the very end, and we've got our nice hide. And we've got a bird. We have got a bird. Yep. Great job, Fumbles. Bet you feel accomplished with yourself. So before we shut the hood, I'm just gonna do a mini tutorial on how we work with the timer. So as you can see, there's these plugins and the time set. So you're gonna have the current time, which, I don't know, I think it's closer to 1, so I'm gonna do that for the current time, see the arrow, and then So the time that you want this to turn on is where it kind of goes up. So I turn this on at 8 in the morning for the lights, and then they go off at about 10 p.m. So that's kind of how it's set up, and then you just plug them all in, and yeah, we'll clip to when this is shut and the lights are all set up. And here we are, this nice enclosure setup. Thanks for watching, guys. I gotta go grab a bird before she destroys things. But have a good day. See you later.